Now, let's take a look at the way that we're going to light it, right? If we start by returning to render here, you'll notice some of the default settings. Let's start from the left over here. You have your lights, you have your sun in location, you have materials, you have your render, and then of course you have all the other settings in each of those panels that we can take a look at. All right. Now, let's just say if we start with a draft quality rendering, okay? And if we take a look at the options for render, you can see here's the size of the output, and also you can take a look at, for example, environment. All right, these are going to be some additional settings that we can take a look at later for our final rendering. But mainly here, you're just looking at the size. For example, we have no lights, we have no materials. If I were to create a draft render here, what you actually see here are the colors of the layers on which each of those parts are placed, and the actual material is the default material. Okay? Now, right now, this is what you see. Again, with no other lights. And if you take a look at sun and location here, you'll be able to see the general properties. You can see right now that is off, right? So right now, the only thing that we can use are these lights right here. Okay? So now that I have my scene here, and I got a chance to see what the initial rendering looks like, let's build our rendering. And let's start with lights first. Again, it's a smart thing to do with lights because then you can see the exposure and the contrast to shadows, even though we don't have any materials just yet. Okay? So one way to proceed would be take a look at your lights panel. All right? If you take a look at your lights in the model, you can see you'll be able to track what lights you have here and then easily come back and make some edits. If you're going to add lights, all right, you're going to use create lights. If you're just using the default lighting, which is what we have right now, you can see we can adjust brightness and contrast, midtones, and things like that using these sliders right here. But right now we have no lights, and so what we'll do is we'll create some lights. I would suggest that you split your viewport into 2 viewports, and what I would suggest also is that you work in parallel projection. So working in parallel projection, I can have a look at the object from the top, okay, and also from another viewpoint. So here we'll go into a southeast ISO, and we'll just zoom in. So the reason for this is because as you're placing lights, with lights, not only are you indicating the location of the light, the target of the light, but also the properties of the light. We're going to work with at least 3 lights. We have the first light that we're going to use as the key light. This light is going to give most of the illumination to the objects. Then we're going to have 2 other fill lights. Fill lights are going to try to get rid of shadows, brighten the object, and give the object some drama by changing some of the colors and the intensity. So in order to add a light, let's say we're going to work with spotlights. Okay, spotlights give us more flexibility because we can adjust the angle of the light and the intensity of the light. Point lights shoot light in all directions. Okay, let's try out spotlights here. As I activate the command, what you see then is a glyph. All right, notice I'm working in the top view on the left-sided viewport. What I'm able to do here is position the XY coordinate. I'll use a point filter to establish the height. So for example, our end plate here, this orange part, red-orange part, it's about 4 inches. And we know that the assembly itself is at Z equals 0. It's right on the ground plane. What I would like to do is maybe bring this key light 2 or 3 times the distance of the whole assembly away from it, and I want to put it about maybe 11 inches above it, almost a foot above it. and make sure that my target is going to be somewhere here on the center pin. So just visually looking, if I want to be in this area, I'm going to use a point filter, point XY. This allows me to click in this view to set the XY location and then to numerically input the Z elevation. So here, type point XY, enter. Now with the left button click, we can indicate the source position of the light. After you do that, you can see at the command line, it's asking you to input the Z value now. We'll punch in 11, hit enter. Now, the next step is to specify the target location. What we can do here now is using our object snap modes, we can actually snap to features on the object, right? So if I wanted to bring it right to the center of the center pin there, I can click right on the face and at the same time establish the X, Y, and Z position. Okay? Now what does that look like? Well, if I enter again, all right, and I start to zoom out, I should see the glyph. As I highlight or go over the glyph, right, you can start to see in either view the shape, the form of the fall off and the hotspot cones. That's indicated by this yellow cone and the orange cone. You'll notice that as I zoom in and select any of the grips, I can adjust the hotspot angle as well as adjust the fall off angle. If I wanted to be a little bit more precise, what I could do is take a look at my lights in the model. I can select the light and then I can right click and do properties. And this way, for example, you can see here I can just use my list to input my information. Now, what I would like you to pay attention to is not only how far this light goes, right, or the angle of the light here, and you'll be able to see that I can adjust the target either using the glyph in the model view or actually using geometry here. Okay, so you can see I can adjust the target using these values here, or I can just zoom in if I can actually snap to and grab the glyph there, which might be difficult, so it really depends what view you're in. Alright, let's try this again. And it might help to hide some information to make the adjustment, right? But all you're doing is you're just grabbing these grips and making adjustments. So you can see right now it's sort of cutting into the assembly, right? And maybe what I need to do is extend it further and also make it larger. Now some base settings you might want to work with here. Let's make a hotspot angle of about 20, a fall off angle of about 62 or 65, and then also take a look at the intensity. Okay, 1 here represents 100%. 100% intensity of the particular light property that you've selected. For now, let's just work with the defaults. And let's work with the light properties here, such as intensity, hotspot, and fall off angle. We'll also take a look at the filter color. Okay, so here what I can do is you'll see the intensity factor will drop it down to about 75%, 0.75. Okay, now again, as I orbit in any of these views, you'll be able to see the relationship of the light to the model, right? And again, as I said, if you're trying to adjust the light target, notice how if you change your views, you can snap to the grips of either the target or the source point. If I grab the target, I'm able to stretch the length of the light, right? So this will impact the clarity of the object. And once you have one light established, what I would do here is go back to your custom view. Go back to your custom view in your active viewport. Make a test render. Okay? You can see right now it's set to draft quality. You can see right now that the shadows are, or the lights are projecting no shadows. It's not so important right now. We just want a draft render. If I click on render here, should open my render window, and then I can take a look at what it looks like. Again, still no materials, but look at this. You can start to see the difference between the previous render, right, with no lighting, and now this render with lighting, right? See a little bit more intensity of light there. So now as we continue, we can start to work with materials or work with more lights. And this is really an option up to you. But for example, let's talk about materials now.